In Homer's epic poem, the Iliad, we are told that the Trojan War was fought over the kidnapping of Helen, wife of King Menelaus of Sparta. After her abduction by the Trojan prince Paris, Menelaus rallied the Greek kings to invade Troy and punish Paris. After 10 long years of siege, the Greeks managed to capture Troy by means of the famous Trojan horse. And with this victory, the Achaeans or Greeks were able to return home with their war booty, including Helen. It is one of the most well-known stories in all of history, or is it? Hello everyone. Welcome to Chronicles Across Continents. Today we will explore the siege of Troy and the Trojan War. We will focus on the myths, the facts, and the archaeology. Let's uncover the secrets of the past together. Did it really happen? If so, when did it take place? Who were the main players? And what can archaeology tell us about this legendary conflict? The story of the Trojan War as told by Homer is full of larger-than-life characters, both gods and humans. We have Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Apollo, Athena, Aphrodite, Ares, and the heroes Achilles, Hector, Ajax, Odysseus. This mythological cast of characters makes for an exciting story. But does it help us to understand whether or not the Trojan War was based on historical events? Well, yes and no. As we shall see, there are some problems with using Homer as a primary source for the Trojan War. But before we get into that, let us follow the story laid out in the Iliad and see what it can tell us about this legendary conflict. We meet the characters in the Iliad during the final year of the siege of Troy. The Greek army besieges the city on all sides. The Trojans defend their city wall against the Greek invaders. During the battle, the Greeks and Trojans fight over the body of the slain Trojan hero Hector. This fight leads to a temporary truce between the two sides. And after the Greeks have desecrated Hector's body, his father, King Priam of Troy, ventures out into enemy territory to beg for the body back. He goes to the Greek camp and finds King Agamemnon, who refuses to return the corpse. So Priam goes to see Achilles, the greatest of the Greek warriors, whose wrath has caused the Greeks to suffer defeats in battle. Priam falls to his knees before Achilles and begs him to return the body of his son. Achilles agrees to return the body, and the two kings share a meal together, after which they part ways. The next day, the Trojans and Greeks go back to fighting each other. The Trojans take Hector's body, burn it on a funeral pyre and lay it to rest in a tomb. That night, the ghosts of Hector and other slain Trojan heroes appear to Achilles and tell him that he must die next. Achilles realizes that his time is short, and he spends his last night in Troy composing a beautiful song. At dawn, he gets up, puts on his armor, and goes out to meet his fate. He fights bravely, but he is killed by an arrow, his only vulnerable spot. With Achilles dead, the Greek army loses its nerve and flees Troy. The Trojans win a great victory, but it is short-lived, because soon after, the Greeks regroup and march on the city again. After the sack of Troy, the Greeks sailed away from Asia Minor back to Greece, taking their plunder with them. They left behind the devastated city of Troy and a small number of survivors. So much for the plot summary. What conclusions can we draw from the story? First off, we can conclude that the story is not history. Even though Homer's poems are called the Iliad and the Odyssey, that is, the tale of Ilion, or Troy, and the tale of Odysseus, these works are epic poems, not historical accounts. They belong to the genre of myth, not history. Why is this important? Because if we approach the poems looking for historical information, we might come away disappointed. But if we understand that Homer wrote poetry and that he uses the Trojan War as his setting, then the story can be appreciated as a wonderful piece of literature. But wait a minute, you might say, didn't Homer write these poems about actual historical events that took place in the late Mycenaean period, around 1200 BC? Well, this was once a popular theory among classicists, but it's out of favor today. Most scholars agree that Homer was not writing about historical people and places, but that he used the Trojan War as a vehicle to explore human emotions such as love, hate, fear, grief, anger, and revenge. One way to tell that Homer was not writing about real historical events is that his geography just doesn't make sense. For example, in the Iliad, we are told that the Achaeans came from the north to invade Troy, and yet their homeland is full of mountains, dense forests, and winding rivers. This is a description of Greece, except that the Greeks had no navy big enough to transport men and war material from Greece to Asia Minor. Another giveaway, that Homer was not writing about the real Trojan War as the presence of monsters. In the Iliad, we are told that the Thracians ride on the backs of winged horses to get to Troy. Now, Homer may have been a poet of pure imagination, but he wasn't an idiot. He knew perfectly well that winged horses didn't exist. And he certainly knew that the Thracians were not flying to Troy on horseback. This detail tells us that Homer lived in a time when the Thracians were seen as exotic foreigners who rode fantastic creatures. This could only have been the case before the Greeks began colonizing the coast of Asia Minor in the late 8th century BC. If Homer was not writing about real events, then when did he live? Most scholars believe he was active in the late 8th century BC. This would make him contemporary with the first Greek colonizers of Asia Minor. And it also means that Homeric Greece was very different from late Mycenaean Greece, the supposed time of the Trojan War. Late Mycenaean Greece was an age of palatial states ruled over by kings and their retinues of elite warriors. Homeric Greece, on the other hand, was a world of independent city-states ruled by kings and aristocrats. The political structure of Homeric Greece is reflected in the poems. Instead of a powerful king like Agamemnon, Homer gives us a world of rival kings, each ruling their own little kingdom. The heroes of the Iliad are the local kings, like Achilles, who rules his Myrmidonian army, and Ajax, who rules his Salaminian army. Only at the end of the poem do we see a king of the Achaean army, but he rules by election, not by inheritance. Furthermore, none of the heroes of the Iliad rule over a Mycenaean-style palace. Instead, they live in tents, their ships are parked nearby, and their army camps around them. All this tells us that the world of the Iliad is not the world of late Mycenaean Greece, but a much earlier world. What about Troy? Was there a city in Asia Minor that the Greeks invaded and destroyed? There is clear evidence that there was a Bronze Age city on the site of Hisarlik in northwest Anatolia. The city flourished during the late Helladic period, that is, late Mycenaean period, and was destroyed sometime around 1180 BC. Furthermore, we know that the city was attacked by seafaring people from the east, perhaps from the region we today call Cyprus. These attacks destroyed the city, and it never recovered. So far, so good. But unfortunately, this is where the evidence stops. We have no evidence that the Greeks ever invaded Troy. The only people we know attacked Troy were those seafaring people from the east. But wait a minute. You might say, didn't Heinrich Schliemann discover the ruins of Troy and find all kinds of Mycenaean stuff there? Well, actually, he didn't. What Schliemann found at Hisarlik was a layer of Mycenaean pottery. This is hardly surprising, since the city was occupied during the late Mycenaean period. Furthermore, the Mycenaean presence at Troy lasted from the 14th to the 13th centuries BC, so nearly 300 years before the alleged destruction of the city. Finally, Schliemann's excavations were badly done. He robbed the tombs he discovered. So many artifacts were lost forever. But even if we were to accept Schliemann's dubious findings, this still wouldn't prove that the Greeks sacked Troy. Let me summarize. Homer composed his poems in the late 8th century BC. He uses the Trojan War as his setting, but his story is not history. The earliest layer of Troy was destroyed around 1180 BC, but we have no evidence that the Greeks were responsible for this destruction. In fact, we have evidence that the city was destroyed by seafaring people from the east. So was there any truth to the legend of Troy? Perhaps there may have been a city on the site of Hisarlik that the Cypriots destroyed, but there is no evidence that the Greeks invaded Troy or that a great war was fought there between the Greeks and Trojans. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and leave me a comment. You can find more episodes on my channel and on various platforms. Thanks again, and see you next time.